October 1994. A military Black Hawk crashes in West Virginia. The crew vanishes. Inside the wreckage, an empty containment unit, torn open from the inside. 3 soldiers were sent to investigate. Only 1 came back human. This is what they're hiding. Subscribe, because you need to hear this. My name is Vincent Park, Chief Warrant Officer 2, U.S. Army Aviation. 23 years flying helicopters, Hueys in the Gulf, Black Hawks in Somalia, little birds for JSOX operations I still can't talk about. I know the sound of rotor wash, like my own heartbeat, can tell you what's wrong with an aircraft from 100 yards away just by listening to the engine harmonics. October 17th, 1994. That's the day I learned there are things worse than crashing. The call came at 05:47 hours. I was at Fort Campbell, 3 days into what was supposed to be a quiet rotation. Training runs, equipment checks, the kind of work that keeps you sharp without keeping you awake. My CO didn't say much on the phone. Just gave me a grid reference in West Virginia and told me I had 90 minutes to assemble a recovery team. What went down? I asked. Black Hawk, nighttime nav exercise. Crew? Silence on the line. Then, that's what you're going to find out. I pulled St. Rodney Banks from the pararescue unit, best medic I'd ever worked with. Former Air Force PJ who'd done 3 tours pulling wounded out of places helicopters weren't supposed to fit. Sergeant Curtis Webb came from the Ranger Battalion, a quiet kid from Montana who could track a squirrel through a blizzard. And because someone upstairs was nervous about something, they assigned us Spec. Aaron Mills from CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, a hazmat specialist. That should have been my first warning. The flight to Dolly Sods took 70 minutes in an MH-6 Little Bird. The pilot, a warrant officer I'd flown with in Panama, kept us low over the Appalachian ridges. Dawn was breaking behind us, turning the autumn forest below into a patchwork of rust and gold. Beautiful country, the kind of terrain that swallows people. LZ's gonna be tight, the pilot said through the intercom. Terrain denial. Too many trees for anything bigger than what we're in. I checked my gear. M4 carbine, sidearm, trauma kit, GPS receiver the size of a brick. Banks had his medical ruck. Webb carried climbing rope and enough ammunition to start a small war. Mills looked uncomfortable in his tactical vest, kept adjusting the straps around his MOPP suit carrier. You expecting chemical contamination? I asked him. Mills was maybe 25. Pale skin that probably never saw the sun. He glanced at the sealed case between his boots. I'm expecting to be prepared. We touched down at 08:19 hours in a clearing half a mile from the crash site. The rotors kicked up a storm of dead leaves and pine needles. The moment we were clear, the little bird lifted off, gone in 30 seconds, leaving us in sudden, heavy silence. The forest pressed in around us. Dense spruce and hemlock, the understory choked with rhododendron and mountain laurel. The air was cold, maybe 40 degrees, and carried the smell of wet earth and decay. Spread out, I said. Webb, take point. Banks, you're with me. Mills, stay in the middle. We moved west. The GPS put the crash site at 2.3 miles bearing 270. The terrain was brutal. Rocky outcrops, steep ravines, tangles of deadfall that forced us to detour every 100 yards. Webb moved like he was born in these mountains, finding game trails I couldn't see, reading the forest like a language. 20 minutes in, he stopped. Tracks, he said quietly. I moved up beside him. The ground was soft with moss and rotting leaves. Someone, or something, had come through here recently. The impressions were deep, unevenly spaced. "Deer?" Banks suggested. Webb shook his head. He knelt, running his fingers along the edge of one print. Wrong shape, wrong weight distribution. He looked up at me. Whatever made this was big, and it was moving fast. We found the Black Hawk at 08:43 hours. It sat in a natural bowl carved between two ridges, nose down at a 15-degree angle. The rotor mast had sheared cleanly. No splintering, no tearing. Just a surgical separation that sent the blades pinwheeling into the trees 100 yards away. The fuselage was intact. No fire damage, no explosion scars. It looked like someone had just set it down. Jesus, Banks breathed. They walked away from this. The cockpit canopy was closed. Through the spider-webbed glass, I could see both seats occupied. Helmets in place, harnesses still buckled. CW2, Webb called from the starboard side. "You need to see this." I moved around the fuselage. The crew door was open, not ripped off, not blown out, open. The steps were deployed, hydraulics still locked in position. "They opened it from the inside," I said, "after they crashed." Webb pointed at the ground. "Look." Drag marks in the dirt. Boot heels, leading away from the aircraft and then stopping abruptly 20 feet out. Just stopping, like whoever was being dragged had been picked up or taken. "Mills," I called. "Get your sensors out. Tell me if we're dealing with a fuel leak or something worse." The specialist pulled a handheld detector from his pack, swept it around the crash site. It clicked softly. Background radiation, nothing unusual. Then he moved to the open crew door and the clicking accelerated. His face went pale. "Sir, temperature reading inside the bay, -196 Celsius. I stared at him. "That's liquid nitrogen." "Yes, sir." "Why the hell would a Black Hawk be hauling liquid nitrogen?" Mills didn't answer. He was looking at something inside the bay, his detector forgotten in his hand. I climbed into the cargo compartment. Banks followed, his medical training overriding his common sense. The interior was coated in frost, every surface, crystallized with ice. My breath came out in clouds. The cold bit through my gloves immediately. The bay was empty, except for one thing. A large metal container bolted to the deck. Military hardware, Tier 4 biohazard rating. The kind of box you use to transport infectious samples or classified biological materials. The access panel was open, the locks torn outward. Not broken, torn. The metal peeled back like aluminum foil. Inside were 3 restraint units. Heavy-duty nylon webbing, steel buckles, medical-grade straps. The kind you'd use to secure a patient during transport, or secure something that wasn't a patient. All 3 were empty. All 3 showed evidence of being forced open from the inside. "Chief," Banks said quietly. He was pointing at the walls. Scoring marks. Deep parallel gouges, 4 to 5 inches long, carved into the steel. The metal was scratched away in layers, exposing bare alloy underneath. I ran my fingers along one groove. It was maybe half an inch deep. "What kind of force does this?" I asked. Banks shook his head slowly. "Human nails couldn't. Not even tools, not without leverage. I don't know what this is." Webb appeared at the crew door. "Cockpit's clear. Harnesses are cut. Clean cuts, like a knife. Blood on the overhead panel. Arterial spatter. Bodies? No bodies." That's when we heard it. A sound from the tree line, maybe 200 yards north. Not quite a growl, not quite a wheeze. Something in between, wet and ragged, like air being forced through a torn windpipe. All 4 of us froze. "Mills," I said softly. Tell me that's wind. The specialist was staring at his detector. The clicking had turned into a steady chirp. That's not wind, he whispered. That's a heat signature. Moving, 40 yards, closing. I brought my M4 up. Everyone out, now. We piled out of the Black Hawk, weapons raised, scanning the forest. The trees were too dense, shadows everywhere. The sound came again, closer this time, accompanied by something else. Branches snapping, heavy, deliberate. Webb, I said. Direction? He pointed northwest. There, in the spruce. I saw it then. A shape, moving between the trunks, low to the ground, but wrong. The proportions were off. Too long in the limbs, the way it moved more like a spider than anything with a spine. It was there for maybe 2 seconds before the shadows swallowed it again. Contact, Banks said, his voice tight. I have contact. Do not fire, I ordered. We don't know what. The shape charged. It came fast, too fast. One moment it was a shadow in the tree line, the next it was 50 yards and closing, moving in a loping, uneven gait that sent it bounding over fallen logs and through the underbrush like the terrain didn't exist. Open fire, I shouted. The forest erupted. Webb's rifle barked first, controlled bursts, textbook engagement. Banks and I joined in, muzzle flashes strobing the trees. Mills dropped flat, fumbling for his sidearm. Rounds impacted wood, sprayed bark. I saw at least 2 hits connect, center mass, good grouping. The thing staggered, veered left, then dove behind a massive oak and vanished. Silence. Just the ringing in our ears and the smell of cordite. Did we hit it? Banks asked. I saw blood, Webb said. Dark, almost black. I moved forward slowly, rifle up, sweeping the tree line. 20 yards from the oak, 15, 10, nothing. It's gone, I said. Bullshit, Webb muttered. I hit it twice. That's when the radio crackled. Command frequency, a voice I didn't recognize, clipped and urgent. Recovery team, this is Overwatch. Pull back immediately. You are not to pursue. Mark your coordinates and prepare for extraction. I keyed the mic. Overwatch, we have possible survivors. We need to... Negative. Survivors are no longer your mission. Mark coordinates. Exfil in 15 minutes. Airspace is now denied. Acknowledge. I looked at the others. Banks shook his head. Webb was staring at the blood trail, thick, viscous, leading west into the deepest part of the forest. Sir, Mills said quietly. My radiation counter just spiked again. Where? He pointed at the blood. We marked the coordinates. We extracted. The little bird came in fast and low, pilot's face grim behind his visor. We didn't speak on the flight back. What was there to say? I filed my report that night. 14 pages, detailed, comprehensive. I described the crash, the cargo container, the restraint units. I described the thing in the trees. I included Webb's photographs, Mills's radiation readings, the blood samples Banks had collected. The report vanished. Not rejected, not classified. Vanished, like it never existed. 3 days later, I got new orders. Korea, immediate transfer. Banks went to Alaska, Webb to Fort Polk. Mills disappeared from the roster entirely. No forwarding station, no contact information. Gone. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was the news report 6 weeks later. Local West Virginia station. Hikers in Dolly Sods had found something. Animal remains, deer mostly, but also a black bear and something else. Something the wildlife officials couldn't identify. The carcasses were arranged in a circle, 1.5 miles from where we found the Black Hawk. The carcasses had been opened, organs removed with what the coroner called surgical precision. And in the center of the circle, they found something else, dog tags. U.S. Army, 2 sets. The names matched the crew manifest of Nighthawk 6. But the tags weren't bloodied. They weren't damaged. They were placed carefully on a flat rock, like an offering. Or a message. I spent 6 months in Korea trying to forget Dolly Sods. Flying supply runs between Camp Humphreys and the DMZ. Routine missions that should have felt like autopilot. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape in the trees, heard that wet, ragged breathing, felt the cold from that cargo bay seeping into my bones. The nightmare started in November. Always the same. I'm back in the forest, following the blood trail. It leads to a cave, and inside the cave are the pilots. Still alive, still screaming. And the thing that took them is wearing their faces like masks. I'd wake up at 0300, drenched in sweat, reaching for a sidearm I wasn't allowed to keep in my quarters. December 4th, 1994. I got an email. Classified routing, but the sender was scrubbed. Just a subject line. You were at Dolly Sods? The message was 3 sentences long. They lied about what was in that Black Hawk. The crew didn't crash, they were sabotaged. If you want to know why, check your P.O. box at Campbell. Don't use military networks for response. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. Every instinct told me to delete it, report it to my CO, forget I'd ever seen it. But my hands weren't listening to my instincts. I printed it. Then I deleted every trace from my account. I took emergency leave in January, told my commander my mother was sick, needed to visit home. The flight from Seoul to Nashville took 14 hours. I didn't sleep once. Fort Campbell's postal center was busy when I arrived. I hadn't checked my box since October. Inside was a single manila envelope. No return address. Postmarked from Arlington, Virginia. Dated 3 weeks prior. I waited until I was back in my rental car to open it. Photographs, maybe 20 of them. Black and white surveillance stills. The first showed the Black Hawk on a tarmac I didn't recognize. Nighttime. Cargo bay open. 3 figures in hazmat suits loading the refrigerated container. The second photograph showed the container up close. Stenciled on the side, Project Nightfall. Do not open without authorization level Omega. The third photograph made my hands shake. It was a medical examination room. Sterile white walls, observation glass, restraint table in the center. Strapped to the table was something that might have been human once. Elongated limbs, skin that looked gray and papery under the fluorescent lights. The fingers, if you could call them that, ended in curved, hooked claws. 6 digits on each hand instead of 5. The face was the worst part, almost human, almost. The eyes were too large, too far apart. The mouth opened too wide, jaw hinged in a way that shouldn't be anatomically possible. At the bottom of the photo, someone had written, Subject 7, Day 47, Mutation Accelerating. The photographs kept getting worse. Medical charts, autopsy reports on lab animals that had been exposed to something called specimen alpha 7 genetic material. Test results showing aggressive cellular mutation, tissue restructuring, complete genetic rewrite at the molecular level. And then, stapled to the back of the stack, a handwritten note on yellow legal paper. CW2 Park. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I worked at Fort Detrick for 11 years. Bioweapons research? What you saw in West Virginia wasn't an accident. It was a containment failure. Subject 7 was being transported for termination after the program was shut down. Someone cut the nitrogen feed mid-flight. The specimen woke up. It killed the cargo handlers, then went after the pilots. The crash was secondary. The specimen survived. It's still out there. They're hunting it, but they can't find it. It's adapting, learning, and it's not alone anymore. If you're reading this, you're on a list. They know you saw it. They're waiting to see if you'll talk. Don't. Not yet. Not until you have leverage. I'm in Virginia. I have more files. We need to meet. A phone number was scrawled at the bottom. Area code 703. I should have burned everything. Should have gotten on the next flight back to Korea and pretended I'd never opened that envelope. But I kept thinking about those dog tags, placed carefully on a rock, like the specimen wanted us to know what it had done, like it was proud. I called the number from a payphone outside a Waffle House in Clarksville. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. This is Chen. This is Park. I got your package. Silence. Then, are you alone? Yes. Stay that way. There's a diner in Alexandria called Murphy's. Tomorrow, 1400 hours, sit at the counter, order coffee. I'll find you. The line went dead. Alexandria, Virginia, January 8th, 1995. The diner was exactly the kind of place you'd pick for a clandestine meeting. Old, crowded background noise high enough to drown out conversation. I arrived early, took a seat at the counter like instructed, ordered coffee I didn't drink. She walked in at 13:57 hours. Mid-40s, Asian woman, hair pulled back tight, wearing a nondescript gray coat and carrying a leather bag that looked heavy. She sat 2 stools away, ordered tea, didn't look at me. 5 minutes passed. Then she spoke, eyes forward. The specimen you encountered was designated Subject 7. It was the 7th attempt to create a viable hybrid using recovered biological material from a 1967 incident in Laos. All previous subjects died within 6 weeks. Subject 7 survived 19 months. Recovered from what? I asked quietly. That's classified above my clearance. But the source material wasn't human. The program goal was to create enhanced soldiers, faster, stronger, capable of operating in extreme environments. They succeeded. Too well. She slid a newspaper across the counter. The Elkins Intermountain, dated December 28, 1994. Front page headline: Mysterious animal attacks continue in Monongahela Forest. 3 hikers missing since Christmas Eve, Chen said. 2 hunters found dead. Cause of death listed as wildlife attack. The bodies showed the same surgical precision you saw in those deer carcasses. Subject 7 is hunting, and it's getting better at it. Why don't they just carpet bomb the forest? Because they don't know exactly where it is. Because public exposure would be catastrophic, and because... She finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired, scared. Because there's evidence it's not acting alone anymore. What does that mean? It means the mutation is transmissible, not through blood or saliva, through something else. The lab reports called it genetic restructuring through proximity exposure. If Subject 7 spends enough time near a mammal, the target begins to change. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer. I set it down carefully. How long does it take? 72 hours for initial symptoms, 2 weeks for complete transformation. The process is agonizing. Most subjects die before it completes. But the ones that survive... She pulled a photograph from her bag, slid it across the counter face down. This was taken 6 days ago by a Forest Service remote camera. I turned it over. The image was grainy, taken at night with an infrared trigger. 2 figures moving through the trees. The first was unmistakably Subject 7, the elongated limbs, the wrong proportions. But the second figure was different. Smaller, more human in shape, but moving with the same wrong, loping gait. Is that one of the pilots? Chen confirmed. Or what's left of him. They found his uniform shredded in a ravine 3 miles from the crash site. No body, just the uniform and enough blood for a transfusion unit. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible over the diner noise. Because I helped create it. Because 23 people are dead. Lab staff, transport crew, test subjects who didn't consent to what we did to them. Because the program was shut down for a reason, and someone restarted it anyway. Someone with enough clearance to move a bioweapon across state lines without oversight. She pulled out a thick manila folder, set it on the counter between us. This is everything I copied before I ran. Medical files, test protocols, transport manifests, communication logs, Subject 7's complete history, from initial infection to escape, and proof that the nitrogen cutoff wasn't mechanical failure. It was deliberate sabotage. Why would someone release it on purpose? I don't know. But the saboteur sent a message to an encrypted server minutes after the crash. I traced it before my access was revoked. The message was 4 words. The asset is free. I stared at the folder like it was radioactive. If I take this, they'll know you gave it to me. They already know. I've been under surveillance since November. 2 cars, rotating shifts, amateur work. They're waiting for me to contact someone. Now I have. So you need to decide. Do you want to know the truth badly enough to become a target? I'm already a target, I said. You said so yourself? I was on the list the moment I walked into that forest. Chen almost smiled, grim, tired. Then you might as well have the ammunition. She stood, dropped a $10 bill on the counter, picked up her bag. Don't try to contact me again. Don't mail anything. Don't use phones. If you're going to use this, do it smart. Public release, simultaneous distribution. Too big to suppress, and don't wait too long. Subject 7 is still adapting, still hunting, and winter's ending soon. What happens when winter ends? She looked at me one last time. It'll start moving south, toward population centers, toward warmer climates where it can breed faster. Then she walked out. I never saw her again. I spent 3 weeks going through Chen's files. Every night in my hotel room, door locked, curtains drawn. The documents painted a picture so disturbing I had to take breaks every hour just to process it. Project Nightfall began in 1968. The source material came from a recovered specimen in Laos, something the Marine Corps found in a cave system near the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The after-action report was heavily redacted, but the attachment was clear. 12 Marines went into that cave. 4 came out. None of them lasted more than a month before the mutation killed them. The program tried to stabilize the genetic material, create something controllable, weaponize it. Subjects 1 through 6 died in containment. Subject 7 survived because of a genetic anomaly. It could regulate the mutation, slow it down, maintain enough human cognition to be trained. They taught it to hunt, to track, to kill on command. Then someone in oversight found out. The program was shut down in 1993. All subjects were ordered terminated, specimens incinerated, records sealed. Except Subject 7 wasn't incinerated. It was transferred to a black site facility for final observation. The transport manifest from October 17th showed 3 people authorized to know about the transfer. A colonel at Fort Detrick, a logistics officer at Fort Campbell, and a civilian contractor with no name, with just a clearance code. Someone in that chain gave the order to cut the nitrogen feed. Someone wanted Subject 7 free. But why? The answer was in the last document, a classified memo dated October 20th, 1994, 3 days after the crash, addressed to an Assistant Secretary of Defense I'd never heard of. The subject line made my blood run cold. Nightfall Asset Recovery. Lave capture preferred. The memo outlined a new program, Project Vanguard. Goal: recapture Subject 7, analyze its post-escape adaptation, study its ability to create secondary mutations in wild populations. Use the data to create a new generation of enhanced soldiers. They didn't want to kill it. They wanted to let it evolve. The memo ended with a single line. Asset demonstrated autonomous problem-solving and tool use. Containment protocols updated. Recommend live observation in natural environment for minimum 6 months before recapture attempt. They were using West Virginia as a testing ground, and everyone who lived there was a lab rat. I made copies of everything, burned them to CDs, made physical backups, stored them in 3 different locations. Then I started reaching out. Journalists I'd met during Gulf War press embeds, a producer at 60 Minutes, a staffer for a Senate Armed Services Committee member who owed me a favor. Nobody wanted to touch it. Too classified, too unverifiable, too dangerous. One journalist was honest with me. Even if this is real, they'll bury you before it goes to print. You're one guy. They're the entire Department of Defense. You'll disappear, the story will disappear, and Subject 7 will keep killing people in the woods where nobody important lives. He was probably right. But I couldn't let it go. Those dog tags, that careful placement. The specimen had left them as a message. Maybe it was time I sent a message back. February 1995. I went back to Dolly Sods, alone, unauthorized. Probably the stupidest decision I'd made in 23 years of military service. But I needed to see it again. Needed to understand what I was really dealing with before I went public. The forest was different in winter. Snow covered everything, 3 feet deep in places, turning the landscape into something alien and pristine. My breath came out in clouds. The temperature was maybe 15 degrees, wind chill driving it lower. I parked at the Dolly Sods trailhead just after dawn. The ranger station was closed for the season. No other vehicles in the lot. I shouldered my pack, supplies for 3 days, cold weather gear, GPS, satellite phone, and my personal M9 Beretta with 4 magazines. If Subject 7 was still out here, I wasn't going down without a fight. The coordinates I was looking for were 2.7 miles northwest of the crash site, the location where hikers had found the arranged carcasses, where the dog tags had been left. The hike took 4 hours. The snow made everything slower, harder. I followed game trails when I could, broke my own path when I couldn't. Twice I saw tracks, deer, maybe elk. Once I saw something else. Prints in the snow, oddly shaped, too large for any native species. They were old, partially filled in by recent snowfall. Days old, maybe a week. But they were there. I followed them for half a mile before they vanished into a rocky outcrop where the snow couldn't accumulate. The stones were dark with moisture, slick with ice. I stood there for 10 minutes, listening. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no wind through the trees. Just the sound of my own breathing and the creak of my pack straps. Something was watching me. I could feel it. I found the site at 13 and 20 hours. The carcass circle was still visible under the snow. Dark stains where blood had soaked into the frozen ground, the faint shapes of bones poking through the white. The rock where the dog tags had been placed sat in the center, a flat granite slab maybe 3 feet across. On the rock was something new, a piece of fabric. Camouflage pattern, U.S. Army issue. Torn from a uniform jacket. I recognized the unit patch immediately. 75th Ranger Regiment. Webb's unit. My hands went numb, and it wasn't from the cold. I keyed my radio. "Webb, this is Park. Come in." Static. "Webb, if you can hear this, respond." Nothing. I tried Banks, Mills, even the emergency frequency. Dead air on every channel. I picked up the fabric piece carefully. The edges were shredded like it had been ripped away by force. There was no blood on it. No other damage. Just placed there deliberately, like the dog tags before it. A message. Or a taunt. That's when I heard it. That wet, ragged breathing. Close. Maybe 30 yards. Coming from the tree line to my east. I turned slowly and moving to my sidearm. The trees were dense, shadows deep between the trunks despite the daylight. I couldn't see anything moving. But the sound continued. Rhythmic, patient. "I know you're there," I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. "I know what you are. I know what they did to you." The breathing stopped. For maybe 10 seconds, there was nothing. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A voice, humanish, broken, like someone learning to speak for the first time through a throat that wasn't built for it. K. It knew my name. I drew my weapon, backing toward the rock. "Show yourself." Movement. A shape detached from the shadows between 2 spruce trees. It stood upright, barely. Hunched forward, arms too long, hanging almost to the ground. The body was wrapped in torn fabric, stolen clothing cobbled together like camouflage. But the face was exposed. Gray skin stretched tight over wrong bone structure. Eyes too large, too dark, but showing something worse than animal intelligence. Recognition, memory. It tilted its head, studied me. The mouth opened slightly, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too numerous. "Webb," I whispered. The creature's head moved. Not quite a nod, not quite a shake. Something in between. It raised one hand slowly. In the clawed fingers was another piece of fabric. Different pattern this time. Air Force issue. Banks's unit. "Where are they?" I demanded. My voice cracked. "Where are Webb and Banks?" The creature, Webb, or what Webb had become, lowered its hand. When it spoke again, the words came easier. Still wrong, still broken, but clearer. Changed. Like me. Can't stop it. It took a step closer. I raised my weapon. It stopped immediately, raising both hands in what might have been a placating gesture. Almost human. Almost. "Don't shoot. Not enemy. Trying. Warn you." "Warn me about what?" "They're coming. Military. New team. Orders to capture. All of us." The creature gestured at itself. "For study. For Vanguard." My blood turned to ice. Chen's documents. Project Vanguard. They weren't just observing Subject 7 anymore. They were collecting specimens. And Webb, Banks, maybe Mills too, had been added to the collection list. "How long?" I asked. "Days, maybe hours. Tracking us, thermal, drones. Can't hide much longer." The creature moved closer, slow and deliberate. I kept my weapon raised but didn't fire. At 10 feet away, I could see details I wished I couldn't. The skin wasn't just gray, it was textured, almost scaled. The joints bent in too many directions. The eyes had no whites, just solid black that reflected light like an animal's. But underneath it all, I could still see traces of Webb, the scar on the left side of its face from a training accident in Georgia. The shape of the jaw, the way it moved with that quiet, Montana caution. "Why did you bring me here?" I asked. Webb reached into the torn fabric covering its torso, pulled out something wrapped in plastic, set it carefully on the rock between us. A USB drive. "Evidence," Webb said. The words came faster now, like it was remembering how. "Recorded, everything. Audio, video, what they did to us. How we changed. They found us 2 weeks after. Offered choice. Come back for testing or be hunted. We ran. How many of you are there now?" 4. Me, Banks, Subject 7, and someone else. Someone who was pilot. Can't talk anymore. Too far. Gone. I picked up the USB drive. It was cold, covered in frost. "What's on this?" "Proof, mutations, pain, everything, Chen. Couldn't give you names, dates, officers who ordered it." Webb's head tilted again. "Release it. Make them answer. They'll kill you if I do. They'll hunt you down." Something that might have been a smile crossed Webb's face. "Already. Hunting us. Already. Dying. Mutation doesn't stop. Won't live much longer. But maybe we stop them doing it to others." A sound cut through the forest. Distant, mechanical, helicopter rotors. Webb's head snapped up. "They're here. You need to go. Now. Come with me. I can..." "No." The word was firm, almost human. "Can't go back. Won't be caged again. This is our forest now. We die. Here." The rotor's sound grew louder. Multiple aircraft. Coming fast. Webb backed toward the tree line. "Run, Park. Don't stop. Don't look back. Tell the truth. Make them pay." I wanted to argue. Wanted to find some way to help, to save what was left of the soldier Webb had been. But the look in those black eyes told me there was nothing left to save. "I will," I said. "I promise." Webb nodded once, then turned and vanished into the forest with impossible speed, moving through the trees like smoke, like he'd never been human at all. I ran, grabbed my pack, grabbed the USB drive, and ran south toward the trailhead. Behind me, the helicopters descended. Blackhawks, 2 of them, maybe 3. I heard rappel ropes deploying, boots hitting snow, radio chatter cutting through the trees. They weren't here for me, not yet. But they would be soon. I made it back to my vehicle in 90 minutes, driving on pure adrenaline and fear. Didn't stop until I was across the state line into Maryland. Pulled into a rest stop, locked myself in a bathroom stall, and finally looked at what Webb had given me. The USB drive was labeled in shaky handwriting, "For the families." The contents of that drive changed everything. Hours of footage shot on what looked like a handheld camera. Webb and Banks documenting their transformation day by day, the pain, the physical changes, their desperate attempts to stay human, and audio files, recordings of radio communications between the containment team and command, officers discussing specimen value and harvest windows, debates about whether to terminate or capture, orders to use non-lethal force to preserve genetic viability for Phase 2 testing. There were medical logs, too. Tissue samples taken from Webb and Banks during a brief capture in January. Lab analysis showing their DNA was being rewritten, chromosome by chromosome. Notes about how the mutation could be induced controllably with the right vector. They weren't just studying it anymore. They were learning how to weaponize it deliberately. I spent 3 days copying everything, verifying timestamps, cross-referencing with Chen's documents. Then I made a decision. I sent it everywhere, simultaneously. 20 news organizations, 15 congressional offices, 10 international outlets. I posted encrypted files on early internet forums, I mailed physical copies to watchdog organizations and military ethics boards. Within 12 hours, the first story broke. Within 24, it was national news. Within a week, Senate hearings were announced. The military denied everything at first, called it disinformation, Russian propaganda, a disgruntled veteran's conspiracy theory. But the evidence was too detailed, too verifiable. Webb's voice on those recordings, Banks's DNA analysis from certified labs, transport manifests with real serial numbers and real signatures. They couldn't suppress it. It was too big, too public, too true. But the victory was hollow. Subject 7 was never found. Neither were Webb, Banks, or the transformed pilot. The containment team searched Dolly Sods for 3 months. Found nothing but abandoned caves and more arranged carcasses, animals this time, no humans. Then the search was quietly discontinued. Project Vanguard was officially terminated. The officers involved were reassigned or retired quietly. No criminal charges, no court-martials. Just a footnote in a classified report that most of Congress wasn't cleared to read. And the families of the Nighthawk 6 pilots finally got answers. Not the ones they wanted. Not closure. Just the truth that their loved ones had been used as test subjects without consent, transformed into weapons, then abandoned when the experiment failed. Chen was right. I became a target. Surveillance, harassment, threats. My military career ended with a general discharge. Not honorable, not dishonorable. Administrative separation due to unauthorized disclosure of classified information. I didn't care. Some things are more important than careers. I live in Montana now, small cabin outside Kalispell, far from the forests of West Virginia. But I still think about Dolly Sods, about Webb standing in that clearing, barely human anymore, but human enough to care about the truth. Sometimes I wonder if they're still out there, if the mutation finally killed them, or if they found some way to adapt, to survive. The Forest Service still gets reports sometimes, hikers seeing things that don't match any known animal, carcasses arranged in patterns, sounds in the deep woods that shouldn't exist. I don't know if it's them. I don't know if I want it to be. But I do know this. What was done to those men? To Subject 7? To all the unnamed victims of Project Nightfall? It's still happening. Different programs, different names, same basic premise. We keep trying to turn human beings into weapons. Keep pushing boundaries that should never be crossed. And eventually, something's going to push back in a way we can't control. If you're reading this, if you're watching this, then you know the truth now. The government will deny it. They'll call me a liar, a conspiracy theorist, a criminal. Maybe they're right. Maybe I broke every oath I ever took. But I kept the one that mattered most. I told the truth. And if you ever find yourself in the mountains of West Virginia, in the deep forests where the maps run out and the silence is too complete, if you see something moving wrong between the trees or hear breathing that sounds almost human, don't investigate. Don't call the authorities. Just run. Because some things aren't meant to be found. And some experiments never really end. They just escape.